Struggling mom takes twins to office. Millionaire boss's reaction leaves everyone in tears. Welcome to Alcott's Stories, where love, betrayal, and fate collide. Dear precious viewers, at Alcott Stories, we don't just tell love stories, we bring them to life. Every tale is crafted with deep emotions, heart-wrenching twists, and unforgettable romance that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Here you'll experience the joy of love, the pain of betrayal, and the beauty of second chances. To our beloved subscribers, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share is not just an interaction, it's a sign that our stories have touched your heart. Thank you for being a part of our journey, for believing in our stories, and for making this community so special. And to our new viewers, if you love powerful love stories filled with suspense, passion, and unexpected turns, you're in the right place. Don't just watch, become a part of our growing family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single moment of love and heartbreak. At Alcott Stories, we believe that every love story deserves to be told, and we can't wait to share more with you. Now sit back, relax, and dive into today's beautiful story. Mia Carter's life had never been easy. She wasn't born into wealth, nor had she ever dreamed of a lavish lifestyle. Instead, she had learned to fight for every ounce of stability she had. At 28, she carried the weight of the world on her slender shoulders, raising her 5-year-old twins, Noah and Lily, all by herself. Her once beautiful love story had crumbled into a nightmare when her husband Daniel walked out on her just after the twins were born. She still remembered the icy finality in his voice when he said he wasn't ready for the responsibility of a family. And just like that, he vanished, leaving her to fend for herself and their babies. The days that followed had been a battle, working multiple jobs, sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and the constant fear of not being enough for her children. But no matter how exhausted she was, Mia refused to give up. Her kids were her everything. Now, working as a secretary at Kingston Enterprises, a billion-dollar corporation, she had finally found a job that provided some financial stability. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the rent, kept food on the table, and allowed her twins to have a decent life. However, there was one problem. Her boss, Nicholas Kingston, the ruthless, cold-hearted millionaire CEO who was feared by everyone in the company. He was gorgeous, powerful, and dangerously intelligent, but his heart was made of steel. He never smiled, never tolerated mistakes, and certainly never cared about anyone's personal life. Mia had managed to stay out of his way for the past year, keeping her head down and working diligently. But today, fate wasn't on her side. The morning had started like any other, rushed, chaotic, and filled with never-ending responsibilities. Mia was already running late, her alarm failing her yet again, and she had to juggle making breakfast, packing lunches, and dressing 2 energetic 5-year-olds. "Noah, stop teasing your sister and put your shoes on," she called out, frantically brushing Lily's curly hair while balancing a slice of toast between her lips. "But I don't like these shoes, Mommy," Noah pouted, his dark brown eyes looking up at her with innocent defiance. Mia sighed, crouching to his level. "Sweetheart, we don't have time for this. Just wear them today, okay?" Noah huffed but obeyed, while Lily giggled at her brother's tantrum. Just when Mia thought things couldn't get worse, her phone buzzed with a message that sent her heart plummeting. "Babysitter. I'm so sorry, Mia. I can't make it today. Family emergency." Mia froze. No, no, no. This couldn't be happening. She quickly tried calling the sitter, but there was no answer. Panic surged through her veins. She had an important meeting at work today. There was no way she could miss it. Her mind raced through options, calling a neighbor, asking a friend, but everyone had their own jobs, their own lives. Mia swallowed hard, gripping her phone. There was only one choice left. She had to take them with her. Her heart pounded at the thought. Nicholas Kingston was not a man who tolerated distractions. He would fire her without hesitation if he found out she brought her children to work. But what other choice did she have? Mia dressed Noah and Lily in their neatest outfits, packed a small bag with snacks and coloring books, and prayed they would stay quiet in her office. "All right, guys," she said, kneeling before them. "Mommy has to go to work today, And you both have to be on your best behavior, okay? Yes, Mommy, Lily chirped, her tiny hand clutching Mia's. Noah, ever the curious one, frowned. But what if your boss sees us? Mia hesitated. Then we're in trouble. She wasn't exaggerating. If Nicholas Kingston found out, she might as well start packing her things. The drive to Kingston Enterprises was nerve-wracking. With every red light, every turn, Mia's stomach twisted with anxiety. She kept glancing at her twins in the rearview mirror, silently begging them to understand how serious this was. When she finally arrived, she hurried them through the employee entrance, keeping her head down. Most of her colleagues were already at their desks, busy with their own work, barely noticing her. Mia exhaled in relief. So far, so good. She guided the twins into her small office space and set them up with their coloring books. Stay here, okay? Don't make any noise. Noah and Lily nodded obediently. Mia rushed to start her work, answering emails and preparing for the morning meeting. She prayed to every higher power that her boss would be too busy to notice anything unusual today. But fate had other plans. Just when Mia thought she might get through the day unnoticed, a deep, authoritative voice sent chills down her spine. Miss Carter! Her hands froze on the keyboard. Slowly, she turned around. Standing at the entrance of her office was Nicholas Kingston himself. Her breath caught in her throat. Tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding power, he was a man who could silence an entire room with a single look. His piercing blue eyes locked onto her with an unreadable expression. Mia's heart pounded. Had he seen the twins? Did he know? Was she about to be fired? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. Good morning, Mr. Kingston. Nicholas stepped into the room, his presence overwhelming. He glanced around, his sharp gaze scanning the small space. Mia's pulse skyrocketed when his eyes landed on the two small figures hiding behind her chair. Lily let out a small giggle. Noah peeked up at the intimidating man curiously. Mia's blood turned to ice. This was it. She was done. Nicholas's jaw tensed. His blue eyes flickered with something unreadable. Annoyance, anger, something else. Then in a moment that stunned Mia to her core, her twins did the unthinkable. They ran straight to Nicholas Kingston, one of the most feared CEOs in the city, and hugged his legs. Nicholas Kingston was a man feared and admired in equal measure. At just 30 years old, he had built Kingston Enterprises into a billion-dollar empire, earning the title of one of the most powerful and ruthless businessmen in the country. His reputation was legendary, a cold, calculating workaholic who lived for profit and success, with no time for distractions, emotions, or children. Nicholas hated kids, not just disliked them, hated them. They were loud, messy, and unpredictable. Three things he despised more than anything. His employees knew this well. No one ever dared to bring their personal lives into his workplace because one mistake, one single moment of unprofessionalism was enough to get them fired. And now, Nicholas stood frozen in Mia Carter's tiny office, his piercing blue eyes locked on the two tiny figures clutching his legs. The entire floor fell into stunned silence as the scene unfolded. Mia Carter's twins, two small, innocent children, had just wrapped their little arms around the legs of the most feared CEO in the city. Noah, the bolder of the two, looked up at Nicholas with an innocent grin. "You're so tall," he declared, his tiny fingers gripping Nicholas's expensive tailored suit. Lily, the softer one, giggled as she hugged his other leg. "You smell nice," she murmured, burying her tiny face against his pants. Gasps echoed throughout the office. Employees stared in horror, watching the impossible happen. Mia's heart stopped. "Oh my God, this is bad. This is really, really bad." She wanted to move to pull them away, but her legs wouldn't work. Fear paralyzed her. She was about to lose everything. Nicholas Kingston was known for firing people over a single late email. What would he do now that two children were literally clinging to him? She expected him to explode in fury. She braced herself for the cold, biting words that would end her career. But instead, he didn't move. Nicholas stood still, his entire body rigid as stone. For a man who was always in control, always commanding the world around him, this was an entirely new experience, and he hated it. His sharp blue eyes darted down at the tiny figures wrapped around his legs, his jaw tightening. His usual air of intimidation and power did nothing to shake them off. They weren't afraid of him. Noah beamed up at him, unbothered by the man's icy demeanor. "Are you a superhero?" the boy asked, eyes wide with admiration. Lily nodded, giggling softly. "You look like one." Nicholas's throat went dry. What what was happening? No one, no one spoke to him like this. Not employees, not investors, not even his own family. And yet here were two tiny strangers, unaffected by his coldness, treating him as if he were some kind of gentle, kind man. Nicholas gritted his teeth. He was not a kind man. He quickly stepped back, his muscles tensing in discomfort. Mia snapped out of her shock and rushed forward, grabbing her children. I, I'm so sorry, Mr. Kingston, she gasped, her voice trembling. They didn't mean to. Nicholas's icy glare snapped to her. My office, now. The words were calm yet deadly, sending a chill down Mia's spine. She swallowed hard, gripping her children's hands. She knew what was coming next. She was about to lose her job. Mia followed Nicholas into his massive office, her heart hammering like a drum. Her twins walked beside her, oblivious to the danger, their tiny hands clutching hers. As they entered, the glass doors shut behind them, trapping her in what felt like a lion's den. Nicholas strode to his desk, turned sharply, and fixed her with a stare so cold it could freeze fire. Explain. His voice was calm, yet filled with contained fury. Mia's throat tightened. She wanted to cry, to beg, to fall to her knees and plead for mercy, but she couldn't. She was a mother, and mothers didn't have the luxury of breaking down. Taking a deep breath, she stood tall. Mr. Kingston, she started, keeping her voice steady, I know this looks unprofessional, and I take full responsibility, but I had no choice. Nicholas's sharp gaze didn't waver. No choice? Mia nodded, her hands clutching the fabric of her skirt. My babysitter canceled at the last minute. I had no one else to watch them. Nicholas's jaw tensed. And you thought bringing them to my office was a better option? Mia bit her lip. I couldn't miss work. I need this job. His expression remained unreadable, but she could feel his irritation radiating off him in waves. You defied company policy, he stated coldly. Mia flinched. I know. You disrupted my office. I know, she whispered. And now the entire company is watching as I stand here, covered in crayon fingerprints. Mia's eyes widened in horror. She glanced at his expensive suit, and sure enough, Lily's tiny fingers had left behind faint marks of pink and blue crayon dust. Her stomach dropped. Oh my God. Mia expected him to explode, to fire her on the spot, to tear into her with the cold ruthlessness he was famous for. But instead, Nicholas Kingston did something no one expected. He sighed, not in anger, but in exasperation. Miss Carter, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose, I don't have time for distractions. Mia's breath hitched. I understand. Nicholas's blue eyes flickered to Noah and Lily, who were now staring at him curiously. For a moment, something in his gaze softened, something he himself didn't even understand. The twins had hugged him, something no one had ever dared to do. And strangely, it hadn't felt as terrible as he thought it would. Nicholas exhaled sharply, shaking the thought away. Keep them out of my sight, he ordered. One more mistake, and you're fired. Mia couldn't believe it. He was giving her a chance. Her throat tightened with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Kingston, she whispered. Nicholas didn't reply, but as Mia led her twins away, she failed to see the way Nicholas's eyes lingered on them a second longer than necessary. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Kingston was confused. The grand office space of Kingston Enterprises had never been so silent. Employees froze, their gazes locked onto an unbelievable sight. Nicholas Kingston, the coldest billionaire CEO, stood utterly motionless as two tiny figures clung to him. Noah and Lily, the twin children of Mia Carter, a struggling single mother who should have been fired on the spot for bringing them here. But the explosion that everyone braced for never came. Instead, Nicholas Kingston, The man who ruled his company with an iron will and zero tolerance for distractions stood still, his expression unreadable, his blue eyes haunted by something no one could understand. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to react. Noah and Lily's small arms wrapped around him felt warm, too warm. Something inside Nicholas stirred, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to experience in decades. His heart thudded painfully in his chest as a memory, one he had buried deep, came rushing back. He was 7 years old, standing in a cold, empty mansion. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he clutched a small toy car, waiting for the one person who had promised to return. But she never did. His mother. She had left, walked away without a second glance, abandoning him to a father who never cared. Nicholas had waited by the door for days, hoping, praying that she would change her mind. She never did. And that was the moment he decided. Love was a weakness. Caring led to pain. He built walls, thick, impenetrable walls. He became untouchable, unreadable, unbreakable, until now. Until two small children, strangers, wrapped their tiny arms around him, unknowingly reaching into the most broken part of him. Nicholas's throat tightened. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't move. He couldn't move, because for the first time in years, he felt something. Mia watched in horror, her heart pounding violently in her chest. Why wasn't he reacting? Nicholas Kingston was not a patient man. A mistake like this should have cost her everything. She expected him to snap, to pull away in disgust, to fire her without hesitation. But instead, he was just standing there, still, silent, lost in a world of his own. His piercing blue eyes darkened, as if he were seeing something no one else could. For a brief moment, Mia forgot to breathe, because for the first time, Nicholas Kingston didn't look ruthless. He looked haunted. The tension in the room was unbearable. The employees of Kingston Enterprises, who had worked under Nicholas for years, had never seen their boss like this. He was always calculating, controlled, and dangerously sharp. But right now, he looked like a man struggling with something bigger than himself. Whispers spread through the office. What's happening? Why isn't he yelling? Did he just freeze? Noah tilted his head, blinking up at Nicholas. You're really quiet, he observed with a childish grin. Are you shy? Lily giggled. Mommy says shy people are really sweet inside. Mia's stomach dropped. Oh. Number Nicholas Kingston. Sweet? The entire office stiffened, waiting for the inevitable storm. But instead of snapping, Nicholas slowly exhaled. His jaw tightened, his hands twitched at his sides, and then, without a single word, he turned around and walked away. Just like that, no scolding, no threats, no icy words. He just left. And the entire office gasped in disbelief. Mia stared at his retreating figure, her mind spinning in confusion. Why hadn't he said anything? Why hadn't he fired her? Nicholas Kingston never let anything slide. So why did he let this go? Her hands tightened around Noah and Lily's shoulders. She didn't understand it. But one thing was clear. Something inside Nicholas Kingston had shifted, and whatever it was, it terrified him. Inside his massive office, Nicholas stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the city skyline. His chest felt tight, his mind racing. What just happened? Why didn't he push them away? Why did he let them touch him? Why did he feel like he had just lost control of himself for the first time in years? Nicholas Kingston had spent his entire life building walls to protect himself from emotions, from weakness, from pain. And yet, in the span of mere seconds, two small children had cracked them open. His reflection in the glass stared back at him. For the first time in his life, he saw a man who wasn't as strong as he had always believed. A man who had just been hugged. And instead of pushing them away, he had stood there like a lost boy. And that realization shook him to his core. Mia rushed through the bustling streets, her heartbeat matching her hurried footsteps as she guided Noah and Lily toward Kingston Enterprises. She still couldn't believe what had happened yesterday. Nicholas Kingston, the ruthless CEO who despised distractions, had allowed her twins to hug him, And instead of firing her on the spot, he had simply walked away. It was so unbelievable that she had spent the entire night replaying the moment in her mind. Had she imagined it? Had the exhaustion from single motherhood finally made her hallucinate? But as she stepped inside the towering glass building, reality confirmed that yesterday wasn't a dream. Because the moment she walked in, she could feel it. The stares, the whispers. The office was buzzing with rumors, voices hushed yet sharp as employees exchanged speculations and theories. Did you hear? He didn't fire Mia. I know, and get this. He let her bring her kids again today. I thought Nicholas Kingston hated kids. This is so weird. What's going on with him? Mia swallowed nervously, tightening her grip on Noah and Lily's hands. The tension in the air was palpable. But what shook her more than the gossip was what happened next. Because just as she approached her desk, a deep, commanding voice cut through the murmurs. Mia! She froze. So did the entire office. Mia turned slowly, her breath catching as she met Nicholas Kingston's icy blue eyes. He stood just a few feet away, towering in his sharp, tailored suit, his face unreadable as usual. But there was something different today, something in his gaze that felt less harsh, less distant. Mia braced herself. Here it comes. He probably changed his mind. He's going to fire me after all. But instead, his next words shocked everyone. You may bring your twins whenever necessary. The office erupted into stunned silence. Mia's eyes widened. What? She whispered, unsure if she had heard him right. Nicholas's expression remained stoic, but his voice was firm. I don't want you distracted by emergencies at home. If you need to bring them, do it, as long as they don't disrupt work. The entire floor felt like it had stopped breathing. Nicholas Kingston, the man who fired people for being 1 minute late, was giving special permission to a secretary for her kids. It was unheard of. As Nicholas walked away, the office erupted in whispers. This is insane. I swear I don't even recognize him anymore. He has never, ever made exceptions for anyone. Maybe the kids reminded him of something? Mia heard it all, but she couldn't focus on the gossip. Her mind was spinning too fast. She stared after Nicholas's retreating figure, confusion swirling in her chest. Why would he do this? Why would he bend his own rules for her? Nicholas Kingston wasn't known for kindness. So what changed? The rest of the day was strangely quiet, yet Mia noticed something. Nicholas was watching. Not in an obvious way, not in a way that made her uncomfortable. But whenever Noah and Lily laughed or chattered near her desk, she would glance up and find him standing by his office window, his gaze lingering on them with an unreadable expression. Once she even caught him staring at Lily when she braided her brother's hair, her small fingers working diligently. His brows had furrowed, his jaw had tightened, and for the briefest second, something flashed in his eyes. Mia couldn't tell what it was. Regret, pain, longing. It disappeared before she could figure it out, but she knew something inside him was shifting, and that realization terrified her. That evening, as Mia packed up her things, she realized she had forgotten to buy groceries. She sighed, glancing down at her twins. Noah, Lily, we need to make a quick stop at the store, okay? They nodded excitedly, and together they walked to a nearby cafe to grab something small before heading home. But the moment Mia stepped inside, she froze, because sitting in the corner of the cafe, alone, was none other than Nicholas Kingston. And he wasn't working. He wasn't on his laptop or on a business call or doing anything a billionaire CEO usually did. Instead, he was staring at a shelf filled with snacks. Not just any snacks, kids' snacks. Mia watched, stunned, as he reached for a small pack of chocolate chip cookies, the same brand Noah and Lily loved. His fingers hesitated over the package, his brows slightly furrowed, as if he wasn't sure what to do. And then, before Mia could process what was happening, Lily's excited voice shattered the silence. Mommy, look, it's Mr. Nicholas. Mia's stomach dropped. Nicholas stiffened, his hand tightening around the cookie pack. Slowly he turned, and for the first time, he looked caught, like a man who had been seen doing something he couldn't explain. Mia's breath hitched. What was happening here? Was this pity, or was it something deeper? The night sky over the city was painted with darkness, clouds rumbling with an impending storm. Lightning flashed, illuminating the glass walls of Kingston Enterprises, and a deep roar of thunder shook the building. Inside the office, the air was eerily quiet. Most employees had already left, escaping before the storm arrived. But not Mia Carter. She was still at her desk, furiously typing, determined to finish the report Nicholas had assigned earlier. With her head down, she didn't notice the lone figure standing in the shadows of the executive office. Nicholas Kingston, watching. His piercing blue eyes were not focused on the financial reports in his hands. Instead, they were locked on something else, or rather someone else. Noah and Lily, the 5-year-old twins, lay curled up on the plush leather couch in his office, their tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful slumber. Their innocent faces were serene, their soft breathing the only sound filling the silent space. And Nicholas, the ruthless billionaire, the man feared by his employees, the man who never let anyone in, found himself standing there, unable to look away. Nicholas clenched his fists. He had never cared for things like this, for children, for warmth, for family. His life was built on power, money, and control, things he could measure, things he could command. Not this, not the strange, aching pull in his chest as he stared at the two small figures on his couch. They looked so vulnerable, so helpless in their sleep. A flash of his own childhood slammed into him, the bitter cold, the feeling of being utterly alone, his mother's face fading into the distance as she left him behind, a memory he had buried deep inside. He gritted his teeth. This wasn't him. This wasn't who he was. And yet, without thinking, he did something he never imagined he would do. He shrugged off his expensive suit jacket and carefully draped it over the twins. Mia had just finished the last of her report, rubbing her tired eyes. She stretched, preparing to gather her twins and head home. But as she stepped toward Nicholas's office, her breath hitched. Through the slightly open door, she saw him, her cold, ruthless boss, her unfeeling employer, kneeling in front of her children, tucking his own jacket over them. Mia's heart stopped. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. Nicholas Kingston didn't have a gentle bone in his body, but there he was, silent, still. And in that small, fleeting moment, he looked almost human, almost broken. A lump formed in Mia's throat. Was there warmth buried beneath his cold exterior? Could it be possible that he wasn't as heartless as he seemed? Or was this just a glimpse of something even Nicholas didn't understand about himself? Nicholas felt Mia's gaze before he even turned around. He straightened, his usual hardened expression snapping back into place. But something about him was different. His eyes weren't just cold. They were haunted, like a man who had just seen something he wasn't ready to face. Mia started, but he cut her off. They shouldn't be here this late, he said, voice firm but lacking its usual sharpness. Mia hesitated, her chest tightening. I didn't mean for them to fall asleep in your office, she whispered. I had to finish the report, and I'm not blaming you. His words shocked her more than anything. Nicholas Kingston never defended anyone, but tonight he had, and it stirred something deep inside her. Mia carefully bent down, gently scooping Noah into her arms while Lily stirred slightly, curling deeper into Nicholas's jacket. Her fingers brushed against the expensive fabric, and her heart clenched. She shouldn't feel this way. Nicholas Kingston was her boss, a man who didn't believe in kindness, and yet, tonight he had given her a glimpse of something else, something raw, something real. Nicholas turned away, stuffing his hands in his pockets, his posture tense. Go home, Mia, he murmured, his voice quieter than usual. She hesitated, searching his face. There was so much she wanted to ask him, so much she wanted to say. But something told her he wasn't ready, not yet. So instead, she gave him a small, hesitant nod. Thank you, she whispered, even though she wasn't sure what exactly she was thanking him for. Nicholas didn't reply. He only stood there watching as she carried her twins out of the office and into the stormy night. And as the door clicked shut behind her, he exhaled slowly, because for the first time in years, he felt something other than emptiness. And that terrified him. The transformation began subtly. At first, it was just a glance. Nicholas Kingston, the feared CEO, would pause for a second too long when his eyes landed on the twins. Then it became a word, a stiff, awkward greeting whenever Noah and Lily entered the office. His deep voice no longer as cold as before. But the real shock came when the entire office witnessed the impossible. Nicholas Kingston, the same man who had once despised distractions, was now engaging with the twins. It happened one afternoon when Lily ran toward his office, her tiny hands gripping a crayon drawing. "Mr. Kingston, look what I made," she beamed, waving the paper in front of him. Nicholas, seated behind his sleek glass desk, raised an eyebrow. Every employee stopped breathing. This was it. The moment Nicholas would remind everyone why he was a ruthless businessman with no patience for children. But instead, Nicholas leaned forward. His blue eyes scanned the drawing, a colorful mess of scribbles and shapes. And then, the unthinkable happened. A slow, barely noticeable smile curved his lips. "Is that supposed to be me?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Lily giggled. "Yes, but Mommy says I need to work on my ears." Noah, standing beside her, added seriously, "And your frowny face, Mr. Kingston. You always look like this." He scrunched his face into a deep, exaggerated frown. The office froze. The entire building might have collapsed, and no one would have been more stunned than Mia. She had been watching from a distance, half expecting Nicholas to scold the kids, but instead he chuckled. A low, almost imperceptible sound, a sound that no one in the office had ever heard before. Mia's heart skipped a beat. If the office had been shocked by Nicholas's reaction to the twins, what happened next left them in utter disbelief. That Friday, as everyone prepared to leave, Nicholas's deep voice called out to Mia, "Stay for a moment." Mia swallowed, approaching his desk. She braced herself for bad news. Was he going to reconsider his kindness? But instead, Nicholas glanced down at Noah and Lily, who were playfully doodling on sticky notes. "Do they like ice cream?" he asked abruptly. Mia blinked. I mean, of course, they love it." Nicholas nodded as if he had just made a business deal. "Tomorrow at noon, bring them to Lancaster Cafe." Mia's breath hitched. He wanted to take them out? Her heart thudded in her chest. Nicholas Kingston, the man who once hated children, was now offering to spend time with them outside of work? "Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly. Nicholas met her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his blue eyes. "I don't say things I don't mean." And with that, he walked away, leaving Mia stunned. The next day at exactly noon, Mia arrived at Lancaster Cafe with Noah and Lily. Her heart was pounding, not because of fear, but because she couldn't understand why Nicholas was doing this. When she spotted him sitting in a quiet corner, dressed in a casual yet incredibly expensive sweater, she almost forgot how to breathe. She had never seen him like this, relaxed, less intimidating. "Mr. Kingston," Lily squealed, running toward him. Nicholas stiffened slightly before awkwardly patting her head. Noah climbed into the seat beside him. "I want vanilla," Lily gasped. "No, chocolate is better." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "How about both?" The twins cheered. Mia, settling into the seat across from him, watched as Nicholas ordered ice cream for them, without hesitation, without annoyance. And for the first time, she saw something in his face she never thought she would. Softness. She bit her lip, confused. Who was this version of Nicholas Kingston, and why did it make her chest ache? As the afternoon continued, Mia couldn't take her eyes off him. The way he listened to the twins, the way he answered Noah's million questions with surprising patience, the way he subtly adjusted Lily's chair when she almost slipped. And most of all, the rare, breathtaking smiles that kept appearing on his face. Mia's heart squeezed painfully. Could it be? Could Nicholas Kingston, the man she once feared, actually have a heart? Could he be changing? But while Mia was lost in her thoughts, Nicholas was facing a war of his own. He was fighting something he didn't want to admit. Mia. She was sitting across from him, her warm brown eyes watching him, her lips curling into a soft smile as she wiped ice cream from Lily's cheek. And Nicholas couldn't stop looking at her. A dangerous heat spread through his chest. Number. This was not part of the plan. He had spent years building a fortress around himself. Love was not something he believed in. It was weakness. It was a distraction. And yet, as Mia laughed softly at something Noah said, Nicholas felt something he hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Something terrifying. Something undeniable. He was drawn to her. That night, when Nicholas returned to his penthouse, he stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the glittering city. His mind raced. For years, his world had been predictable. Work, power, success, no distractions, no emotions. But Mia, her presence had become a storm inside him, a storm he wasn't ready for. And yet, he couldn't seem to stay away. A false hope. For the first time in years, Mia felt something unfamiliar. Happiness. Nicholas Kingston, the man she had once feared, was changing. He was no longer just the ruthless CEO who ruled with an iron fist. He had softened around Noah and Lily. He had smiled more in the past few days than in years. And most of all, she couldn't ignore the way he looked at her. The piercing blue eyes that once held only ice now flickered with something dangerous, something intoxicating, something that made her heart race. Could it be? Could Nicholas feel the same pull that she did? But just when Mia dared to hope, her world came crashing down. It was a late evening. Mia had just finished settling the twins in the lounge area when she heard voices drifting from Nicholas's office. A woman's voice, cold, sharp, familiar. She hesitated outside the slightly open door, her heart thudding as she recognized the voice. Victoria Lancaster. Nicholas's ex-fiancée. The socialite who had once been set to marry him before their engagement had mysteriously ended. Mia frowned. What was she doing here? She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop. But the next words froze her in place. You're actually entertaining the idea of getting involved with that? Nobody? Victoria's voice was laced with cruelty. Mia's breath caught. Nobody? Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to keep listening. Nicholas let out a sharp exhale. Victoria, don't start. Oh, I will start. Victoria's heels clicked against the floor as she moved closer to him. You, Nicholas Kingston, the man who never let anyone in, are suddenly playing hero to some struggling single mother? She scoffed. How pathetic. Mia's fingers tightened around the doorframe. Pathetic? That's what Victoria thought of her? And Nicholas, he didn't defend her. Not immediately. Instead, he remained silent. Victoria laughed mockingly. Let's be real, darling. This isn't about her. You're just entertained by the idea of playing knight in shining armor. It's just a temporary distraction. Mia's heart shattered. Distraction? Was that all she was? A game? A momentary whim for a billionaire who would never see her as more than just his employee? Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had trusted Nicholas. She had begun to believe there was something real between them. But this was her wake-up call. She took a shaky step back, her entire body trembling. She had been so foolish. How could she let herself believe that a man like Nicholas Kingston, a billionaire who lived in a different world, could ever see her as his equal? She turned and walked away, the pain in her chest unbearable. But before she could leave completely, she heard Nicholas's final words. Words that both shattered and confused her. Victoria, you don't know anything about Mia. His voice was dangerously low. Victoria laughed. Oh, please. You think this little fantasy of yours will last? Nicholas, men like you don't fall in love with women like her. Silence. Deadly silence. And then, Nicholas's response. I already have. Mia couldn't breathe. I already have. Did Nicholas just admit he had feelings for her? But then why had he let Victoria speak about her like that? Why hadn't he shut her down immediately? The pain inside Mia was too deep. too raw. She couldn't do this. She wouldn't allow herself to fall for a man who might not fight for her. That night, when Nicholas walked past her desk, she didn't even look up. When he stopped beside her, his presence radiating warmth, she forced herself to act indifferent. "Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes, Mr. Kingston?" His jaw tightened at the formality. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he didn't. Instead, he nodded stiffly and walked away. And with that, Mia knew. Whatever was happening between them, it had to stop. She wouldn't be a fool again. Mia hadn't been the same since that night. The moment she overheard Nicholas's conversation with Victoria, something inside her had shattered beyond repair. She had been a fool to think someone like Nicholas Kingston could ever see her as an equal. She had been stupid to believe that his kindness meant something deeper. That maybe, just maybe, he was different. But no, Victoria had been right. Men like Nicholas didn't fall in love with women like her. She was nothing but a temporary distraction. And the cruelest part? Nicholas hadn't even denied it. Even when Victoria had insulted her, he had hesitated. And that hesitation had cost him everything. The next morning, Mia walked into Kingston Enterprises a different woman. She no longer looked at Nicholas when he passed by. She no longer lingered when he spoke to her. She kept their conversations strictly professional, and the warmth between them was gone. And Nicholas, he noticed. He felt it, and he hated it. Nicholas Kingston wasn't a man who cared about emotions. He wasn't someone who lost sleep over people's feelings. But Mia's sudden coldness, it was driving him insane. She had always been warm, always greeted him with a soft smile, always made his office feel less suffocating. Now she barely looked at him. Now her voice was distant, her eyes blank when she spoke to him. He had no idea what went wrong. Had he done something? Why had she suddenly built a wall between them? And why did it bother him so much? He hated this feeling. He hated the emptiness in his chest whenever she brushed past him without a glance. And worst of all, he hated how much he missed her. Nicholas couldn't take it anymore. It was late evening, and most of the employees had left for the night. Mia was still at her desk, typing away, pretending he didn't exist. Enough. He wasn't a man who begged for attention, but he also wasn't a man who let things slide. He stormed toward her, his blue eyes dark and intense. "Mia," he said, his voice sharp. She didn't look up. "Yes, Mr. Kingston." His jaw clenched. There it was again, that damn formality. His patience snapped. "Stop it," he growled. Mia froze. Her fingers stilled over the keyboard, but she didn't look at him. "Stop what?" she asked, her voice calm, too calm. Nicholas leaned down, placing both hands on her desk, caging her in. "Stop acting like I don't exist," he said, his voice dangerously low. Mia finally looked up, and what Nicholas saw in her brown eyes nearly knocked the air out of his lungs. Pain. Deep, raw, unforgiving pain. She wasn't just avoiding him. She was hurt, and Nicholas hated himself for not knowing why. He lowered his voice. "Mia," he murmured, "talk to me." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she quickly looked away. "There's nothing to talk about, Mr. Kingston," she said stiffly. Nicholas flinched. She never used to call him that. Not like this. His hands fisted on the desk. "Is this about Victoria?" he asked suddenly. Mia's entire body stiffened. Nicholas noticed. So that was it. She had heard. His heart sank. "Mia, whatever you think—" "I don't think anything," she cut him off, finally standing. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stepped away from him. "I don't care about your personal life, Mr. Kingston," she said, her voice cold. Nicholas felt something twist inside him. She was lying. She did care, and that realization terrified him, because for the first time in his life, he cared too. Nicholas wasn't a man who lost control, but Mia was testing his limits. He grabbed her wrist gently but firmly, forcing her to face him. She gasped, her brown eyes wide with shock. "Don't lie to me," he growled. Mia's breath hitched. "Nicholas," his grip tightened slightly. "Look me in the eye and tell me I don't mean anything to you," he demanded. Mia's lips parted, but no words came out, because she couldn't say it. because it would be a lie. But she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of knowing that. She yanked her wrist free, taking a step back. "This isn't about me," she whispered. "It's about you." Nicholas stiffened. Mia's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "You don't know how to love, Nicholas," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't even believe in it." His entire body went rigid, because she was right. Love was a weakness, an illusion, something that had only ever brought him pain. And yet, Mia's next words wrecked him. "I won't let myself fall for a man who will never fight for me." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Nicholas standing there, his heart pounding, his mind racing, his entire world crumbling around him because he had just lost the one thing he never thought he needed. For the first time in his life, Nicholas Kingston felt powerless. Mia was slipping away, and he didn't know how to stop it. The cold, calculated businessman inside him told him to let her go, that feelings only led to destruction. But another part of him, one he had buried deep, was screaming at him to fight. But how could he fight for something he had never believed in? How could he fight for love when he had spent his entire life rejecting it? The next morning he walked into the office, his usual icy mask back in place. But everything felt wrong. Mia was still there. She still worked efficiently. She still spoke to him with perfect professionalism, but the warmth was gone, and Nicholas felt like he was suffocating in his own company. His once pristine office now felt empty. His perfectly structured life now felt meaningless. And the worst part? He knew he was the one who ruined it. Mia wanted to hate him. She wanted to believe that Nicholas was just another arrogant billionaire who didn't care about anyone but himself. But every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the way he looked at her. She remembered the way his blue eyes darkened with pain when she walked away, the way his grip had tightened around her wrist, like he was afraid of losing her. But he had never stopped her. He had never fought for her, and that was enough to tell her everything she needed to know. She had spent years fighting alone, fighting to survive, fighting for her twins. She wouldn't fight for a man who refused to fight for her. 2 nights later, Mia was putting Noah and Lily to bed when her phone buzzed. She frowned at the unknown number, but answered. "Mia Carter?" A deep voice spoke. Her heart skipped a beat. "Nicholas." "What do you want, Mr. Kingston?" she asked coldly. There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Meet me for dinner." Mia blinked. "What?" "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. Meet me at La Lumiere." Her pulse quickened. La Lumiere was the most expensive restaurant in the city. "What's this about?" she demanded. Nicholas hesitated, then spoke in a voice she had never heard before. Low, uncertain, almost vulnerable. "I just need to talk to you." Mia's grip tightened around the phone. Her mind screamed no, but her heart whispered yes. After a long silence, she finally answered. "Fine." And then she hung up, her heart pounding. She had no idea that this dinner would change everything. The next night, Mia arrived at La Lumiere in a simple but elegant black dress. She wasn't sure why she felt so nervous. It wasn't a date. It couldn't be. Nicholas Kingston didn't date. He controlled, manipulated, and discarded. But when she stepped into the dimly lit restaurant and saw him sitting at a secluded table, something in her chest tightened. He wasn't in his usual business suit. Instead, he wore a dark blue dress shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, his sleeves rolled up. He looked different, less like a ruthless CEO, more like a man, a dangerously handsome, deeply troubled man. And when he looked up and saw her, his sharp blue eyes softened. Mia swallowed hard. This was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. She should turn around and leave, but her feet wouldn't move. Because deep down, no matter how much she denied it, a part of her wanted to be here. Mia sat down, keeping her expression neutral. Nicholas ordered wine, but she refused, sticking to water. He didn't seem offended. For once, he didn't seem like the intimidating businessman everyone feared. He just seemed tired. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted after a long silence. Mia frowned. "Do what?" Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Talk, apologize, feel." Mia's breath caught. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You were right," he said hoarsely. I don't know how to love. She flinched. Hearing him say it out loud made it worse. But I think, he hesitated, I think I want to learn. Mia's heart stopped. What? Nicholas clenched his fists as if struggling with his own emotions. I don't know what this is between us, he admitted. I don't know how to handle it. But I know one thing. He looked into her eyes. I don't want to lose you. Mia's pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't the Nicholas Kingston she knew. This wasn't the cold, ruthless billionaire who played with people's lives. This was a man who was afraid. Afraid of his own feelings. Afraid of losing something real. And for the first time, Mia saw the truth. Nicholas wasn't heartless. He was just terrified. Terrified of love. Terrified of her. And suddenly she didn't know whether to run or stay. Mia stared at Nicholas, her fingers tightening around the stem of her untouched water glass. His confession echoed in her mind. I don't know how to love, but I think I want to learn. What did that even mean? Was he asking her to teach him? Or was this just another game, a billionaire's way of keeping control? Her heart wanted to believe that the man sitting before her was sincere, that he wasn't just toying with her emotions. But could she take that risk? Could she let herself fall for a man who didn't even understand love? Mia exhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully. Nicholas, I appreciate your honesty, but love isn't something you just decide to learn. It's a feeling, a choice, and I'm not sure if you're capable of making that choice. She expected anger. She expected that familiar icy mask to slam back into place. But Nicholas simply nodded, his blue eyes unreadable. That's fair, he murmured. Silence stretched between them. Mia's pulse quickened. She needed to leave before she made a mistake, before she let herself hope. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. Nicholas reached for her wrist, his touch surprisingly gentle. Mia, his voice was almost a whisper. Please, don't shut me out completely. Her chest tightened. She wanted to walk away, but instead she found herself whispering, Good night, Nicholas. And then without looking back, she left. Not realizing that he watched her the entire time. Not realizing that for the first time in his life, Nicholas Kingston was terrified of losing something money couldn't buy. Nicholas sat there long after Mia left, his mind racing. His entire life, he had controlled everything. His business, his emotions, his future. But he couldn't control Mia, and that scared him more than anything. She was different. She wasn't impressed by his wealth. She wasn't intimidated by his power. She was the first person who had ever looked past his billions and seen him. And that made her dangerous, because if he let himself fall for her, she could destroy him, just like his mother did when she walked away, just like Victoria did when she used him for his wealth. Nicholas clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. Love was a weakness. It always had been. But then he thought about Mia's smile, Noah and Lily's laughter, the way his heart ached when she looked at him with disappointment, and for the first time in his life, Nicholas wondered if maybe, just maybe, love wasn't a weakness after all. Maybe love was the one thing he had been missing. The next morning, Mia was still processing her emotions when a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment. Her heart skipped a beat as the driver stepped out and handed her a small envelope. From Mr. Kingston, he said before driving off. Mia hesitated before opening it. Inside was a simple note. Meet me at the park at 4 p.m. No business, no pressure, just a chance to talk. Nicholas. Mia's lips parted in shock. Nicholas Kingston? At a public park? That was like seeing a shark in a fishbowl. She should say no. She should ignore him. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't, because no matter how much she tried to deny it, Nicholas Kingston had already started to change her world, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. At exactly 4 p.m., Mia arrived at the park with Noah and Lily. Her breath caught when she spotted Nicholas. Dressed casually in dark jeans and a fitted sweater, he looked completely out of place, yet strangely comfortable. The twins saw him first. Nicholas! Before she could stop them, they rushed toward him. Mia expected Nicholas to look uncomfortable, but instead, he smiled, a real, genuine smile. He knelt down, letting the twins tackle him. "Hey, troublemakers," he said, ruffling their hair. Mia's heart twisted. Who was this man? Where was the cold, ruthless CEO she once knew? Noah grabbed Nicholas's hand. "Come play with us." Mia expected Nicholas to refuse, but to her absolute shock, he stood up and said, "All right, let's go." And just like that, Nicholas Kingston, the billionaire CEO feared by thousands, was pulled toward the playground by two 5-year-olds. Mia watched in awe as he pushed them on swings, helped them build a sandcastle, even let Lily sit on his shoulders as she giggled uncontrollably. And with every passing second, something inside Mia's chest softened. Because at that moment, Nicholas wasn't a ruthless businessman. He wasn't a billionaire CEO. He was just a man. A man who, against all odds, was trying to change, and it terrified Mia to realize that she might actually be falling for him. Just as the moment turned perfect, it was shattered. A sleek, expensive car pulled up to the park, and stepping out was none other than Victoria, Nicholas's ex-fiancée. Dressed in designer heels and a smug smile, she crossed her arms and smirked. "Well, well," she drawled. "Look at this. The great Nicholas Kingston playing house." Mia's stomach dropped. Nicholas's entire body tensed. But Victoria wasn't done. With a wicked glint in her eyes, she turned to Mia and said, "I hope you didn't actually think this was real, sweetheart. Nicholas doesn't love. He never has." Mia's breath caught. Pain stabbed through her chest. And in that moment, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Nicholas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning in ways it never had before. Mia's words haunted him. "I won't let you learn how to love on me, Nicholas. Love isn't a game." Her eyes had held so much pain, so much disappointment. He clenched his jaw, sitting up. He had lost deals worth billions. He had faced boardrooms full of cutthroat businessmen. And yet none of that had ever made his chest ache the way losing Mia did. His hand reached for his phone on the nightstand. Should he call her? Should he at least try to make things right? But fear held him back. What if she didn't want to hear from him? What if she had already moved on? Nicholas had always prided himself on being a man of control, a man who made rational decisions. But right now, he felt lost, and that terrified him more than anything. Mia sat on the couch, staring at her silent phone. She had told herself she wouldn't wait for Nicholas to call. She had told herself that she had made the right decision. Then why did it feel like she had just torn out her own heart? Noah and Lily were asleep, curled up beside her. Their tiny hands clutched the blanket as they breathed peacefully. Mia stroked their hair, fighting back tears. She had always been strong. She had endured a husband abandoning her. She had raised twins alone. She had worked long hours just to survive. But nothing had prepared her for the pain of walking away from Nicholas. Because despite everything, despite her fears, despite Victoria's words, she had loved him, and now she didn't know how to stop. The next morning, Mia forced herself to focus on work. She had to be strong for her kids. She had to move forward, but she didn't realize that Noah and Lily had other plans. As soon as they woke up, they noticed their mother's red eyes. Lily frowned. "Mommy, did Mr. Nicholas make you sad?" Mia's heart squeezed. She forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. I just didn't sleep well." But Noah wasn't convinced. "He likes you, Mommy. He's just dumb." Mia's lips twitched despite herself. "He's not dumb, baby. He's just complicated." But Noah and Lily exchanged a knowing look, and that's when their plan began. Nicholas sat in his office, drowning in work, but for the first time in his life, he couldn't focus. Mia's absence was crushing him. He had thought the silence in his penthouse was unbearable, but this was worse. His office door suddenly burst open, and before he could react, two small figures ran straight toward him. Noah and Lily. His heart stopped. They weren't supposed to be here, and yet here they were, storming into his office like they owned the place. "Mr. Nicholas," Lily shouted, hands on her hips. Nicholas blinked. Hi." Noah climbed onto his chair. Nicholas stiffened, but didn't stop him. "We need to talk," Noah said seriously. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "You're 5. What could you possibly need to talk about? Noah leaned forward. Do you love our mommy? Nicholas choked on air. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. How was he supposed to answer that? Before he could recover, Lily grabbed his tie, pulling him down so their faces were inches apart. You made mommy sad, she said, and we don't like that. Nicholas's throat tightened. For the first time in his life, he felt like a villain. He had never cared what people thought of him before. But seeing these tiny, innocent faces looking at him like he was the bad guy, it hurt. Noah crossed his arms. You need to fix it. Nicholas exhaled slowly. How do I do that? Lily beamed. By saying sorry and making mommy happy again. Nicholas rubbed his temples. He had never apologized for anything in his life. He didn't even know how. But as he looked into Noah and Lily's hopeful eyes, he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't lose Mia. Not like this. Not because of his own stubbornness. He had to do something, and he had to do it fast. That night, Mia was cleaning up in the kitchen when she heard a knock at the door. She frowned. It was late. Who could it be? She opened the door, and her breath caught. Nicholas stood there, dressed in a dark suit, looking more handsome than ever. But it wasn't just him. It was what he was holding. A giant bouquet of Mia's favorite flowers, a small teddy bear for Lily, and a toy race car for Noah. Mia's throat tightened. What are you doing here? Nicholas exhaled, his blue eyes locking onto hers. I need to talk to you. Mia hesitated, her heart pounding. But then she saw Noah and Lily grinning behind him. And she knew. This was their doing. She sighed, stepping aside. Come in. Nicholas had never apologized before. Not to a business rival, not to an ex, not to anyone. But tonight, he needed Mia to know the truth. He sat across from her, his hands clenched. I've never done this before, he admitted. Mia crossed her arms. Apologized? He nodded. Mia sighed. Then maybe you should start. Nicholas swallowed. I'm sorry. Mia's lips parted slightly. It was the first time she had ever heard those words from him. He took a deep breath. I was scared of what I was feeling, of what it meant. But losing you made me realize something. Mia's heart pounded. What? Nicholas reached for her hand, his touch gentle. I love you, Mia. Mia's breath caught. She searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. But there was none. For the first time, Nicholas Kingston was completely vulnerable, and it was because of her. Tears filled Mia's eyes. She had waited for these words, but she had never expected them to sound so real, so raw, so genuine. Nicholas squeezed her hand. I don't know how to be perfect, but I want to try. For you, for Noah and Lily, if you'll have me. Mia's heart swelled. For the first time, she let herself believe it. This wasn't just a game. Nicholas had truly changed. And so, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she whispered the words she had been too scared to say before. I love you too, Nicholas. And as he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, she finally felt safe. She finally felt home. For the first time in years, Mia felt peace. Nicholas's confession had been genuine. His arms had felt warm, safe. She had spent years building walls around her heart, but now they were crumbling. Could she finally have the love she dreamed of? Could Nicholas truly be the man she needed? But deep inside, a tiny voice still whispered, what if this is temporary? Nicholas sat in his office the next day, but his mind wasn't on work. For years, he had been a man who only cared about business, about winning. But Mia, Noah, and Lily had become the most important victory of his life, and he wasn't going to let them slip away. So he made a decision, a bold one that would prove to Mia that his love wasn't just words, it was forever. Mia arrived at work that morning, feeling lighter than she had in years. Nicholas had changed. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he looked at Noah and Lily with real affection, in the way he held her close like she was the most precious thing in the world. But then, Victoria walked into the office. Mia's heart froze. The woman who had once whispered painful words to her. The woman who had tried to make her feel like nothing. Victoria's red lips curled into a smirk as she strode straight to Mia's desk. "You really think Nicholas is different now?" she sneered. Mia's hands clenched. Victoria leaned in, lowering her voice. "You're just his latest obsession, a plaything. He'll get bored, Mia. He always does." Mia's stomach twisted. The old fear tried to creep in. But then she took a deep breath, and she remembered. Nicholas's words, his actions, the way he had held her, the way he had promised to try. Mia met Victoria's gaze, her voice steady. "You don't control his heart. He does. And this time, I believe him." Victoria's smirk vanished. For the first time, Mia saw something she never expected in her. Doubt. And that's when Mia realized. Victoria had never been confident. She had been jealous. Because Nicholas had never fought for her the way he was fighting for Mia now. That evening, Mia walked into her apartment, her mind still spinning from the day. She wasn't expecting the candles, or the soft music, or the way Nicholas was standing there, dressed in a crisp black suit, holding a small velvet box. Mia's breath hitched. "What's this?" she whispered. Nicholas stepped closer, his blue eyes filled with something deep, something real. "This is me proving that I meant what I said." Mia's heart pounded as he got down on one knee. Her hands flew to her mouth. Noah and Lily giggled in the background, clearly in on the surprise. Nicholas opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "Mia Carter," he said, his voice steady. "I never believed in love before you. I never believed in family before you. But now I can't imagine my life without you and the twins." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. "I want to spend forever proving to you that you are not a mistake, that you are not replaceable, that you are the only woman I have ever truly loved." Mia's breath shook. Could she trust this? Could she believe in this? Then she looked at Noah and Lily, who were smiling so brightly, and she looked at Nicholas, the man who had gone from cold and distant to someone who was willing to fight for her. Her lips trembled. "Yes," she whispered. Nicholas's eyes lit up. "Yes?" A shaky laugh escaped her. "Yes, Nicholas Kingston. I'll marry you." A deep breath of relief left his lips. Then he stood, pulled her close, and kissed her, a kiss that tasted of forever. Noah and Lily cheered, and in that moment, Mia knew. She had found home, for real, for always. The sun bathed the Kingston estate in golden light. The garden was decorated with white roses, the scent filling the air. Every chair was lined up, every guest dressed in elegance. Mia stood in the bridal suite, staring at her reflection. She had never imagined wearing a wedding gown, a dress so delicate, so beautiful. Today was the day she would become Mia Kingston, the mother of two amazing children, the wife of a man who had gone from cold-hearted to the only man she ever wanted. But just as she smiled, just as she allowed herself to breathe, a knock sounded at the door. A bridesmaid entered, her face pale. "Mia, there's something you need to see." Mia followed her down the hallway, her stomach tightening. The wedding was about to start. What could possibly be wrong? Then she froze, her breath hitched, because standing at the entrance of the mansion was Victoria, and she wasn't alone. She held papers in her hand, her red lips curled in cruel victory. "I warned you, didn't I?" Victoria's voice dripped with poison. Mia's heart pounded. The guests whispered. Nicholas stood at the altar, his blue eyes narrowing. "Victoria," his voice was dangerous. "Why are you here?" She smirked. "To stop this wedding." Mia's world spun. Victoria lifted the papers. "These are proof that Nicholas is still legally engaged to me." Gas filled the air. Mia's body turned cold. Had she been a fool? Had Nicholas played her all along? Nicholas stormed forward, his jaw clenched. "You're lying," he growled. Victoria laughed. "Am I? Look at the documents. Your signature is right there." Mia's vision blurred. This couldn't be happening. She had trusted him, believed in him. Was Victoria right all along? Nicholas grabbed the papers, his fingers trembling as he scanned the text. Then his expression shifted, from anger to pure rage. "This is fake." Victoria's smirk faltered. What? Nicholas tore the papers in half. I never signed this. His blue eyes burned with fury. And I would never choose you over Mia. The guest murmured. Mia's breath shook. Nicholas turned to her, his expression desperate. Mia, please. You have to believe me. But her heart ached. How could she be sure? How could she know this wasn't a mistake? Then a small voice interrupted. Daddy and Mia whirled around. Noah and Lily stood at the garden arch, their tiny faces worried. And that's when she saw it, the way Nicholas looked at them. Not just with love, with protection, with family. He wasn't just fighting for her, he was fighting for all of them. Mia took a deep breath. Then she walked forward, and she reached for his hand. Because this man, this flawed, complicated man, was her home. Victoria screamed in frustration as security escorted her away. But Mia barely noticed, because Nicholas was holding her hand like she was his entire world. And when he whispered, "Marry me, Mia," she whispered back, "Always." The ceremony continued. Noah and Lily held the rings, giggling as they ran up the aisle. Nicholas's vows were soft and raw. I was a man who never believed in love. But then you and the twins showed me what real love means. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and never let you feel alone again. Mia's tears fell freely, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, Nicholas pulled her close, kissed her deeply, and the crowd cheered. Noah and Lily jumped up and down, and Mia knew this was more than a wedding. This was a new beginning, a forever. As the night faded, Nicholas lifted Mia in his arms. She laughed, burying her face against his chest. Where are we going? She asked. Nicholas smirked. Our honeymoon. I have a lifetime to make up for, Mrs. Kingston. Mia blushed, and as the twins waved goodbye, as the stars sparkled above them, she realized one thing. She had fought for love, and love had fought for her too.